He paused and lit a cigarette, one of my best, and quite thrown away on him. "Those tough floors, now," he resumed, "I wouldn't make too free with them. There's some of them would jump under you like a spring bed. Many's the night I was in and out of those attics following my poor uncle when he had a bad turn on him. The horrors, you know. There were nights he never stopped walking through the house. Good Lord, will I ever forget the morning when he saw the devil coming up the avenue. 'Look at the two horns on him,' says he, and out with his gun and shot him, and begat it with his own donkey." Mr. Knox gave a couple of short laughs. He seldom laughed, having in unnatural perfection the gravity of manner that is bred by horse dealing, probably from the habitual repression of all emotion save disparagement. The autumn evening, grey with rain, was darkening in the tall windows, and the wind was beginning to make bullying rushes among the shrubs in the area. A shower of soot rattled down the chimney and fell on the hearthrug. "More rain coming," said Mr. Knox, rising composedly. "You'll have to put a goose down these chimneys some day soon. It's the only way in the world to clean them. Well, I'm for the road. You'll come out in the grey next week, I hope. The hounds will be meeting here. Give a roar at him coming in at his jumps." He threw his cigarette into the fire and extended a hand to me. "Good bye, Major. You'll see plenty of me and my hounds before you're done. There's a power of foxes in the plantations here." This was scarcely reassuring for a man who hoped to shoot woodcock, and I hinted as much. "Oh, is it the cock?" said Mr. Flurry. "Believe me, there never was a woodcock yet that minded hounds, now, no more than they'd mind rabbits. The best shoots ever I had here, the hounds were in it the day before." When Mr. Knox was gone, I began to picture myself going across country, roaring like a man on a fire engine, while Philippa put the goose down the chimney. But when I sat down to write to her, I did not feel equal to being humorous about it. I dilated ponderously on my cold, my hard work, and my loneliness, and eventually went to bed at 10 o'clock, full of cold shivers and hot whisky and water. After a couple of hours of feverish dozing, I began to understand what had driven great uncle Mccarthy to perambulate the house by night. Mrs. Cadogan had assured me that the Pope of Rome hadn't a better bed under him than myself. Wasn't I down on the new flog mattress the old master bought in Father Scanlon's auction? And by the smell I recognised that flog meant flock. Otherwise I should have said that my couch was stuffed with old boots. I have seldom spent a more wretched night. The rain drummed with soft fingers on my window panes. The house was full of noises. I seemed to see great uncle Mccarthy ranging the passages with Flurry at his heels. Several times I thought I heard him. Whisperings seemed borne on the wind through my keyhole. Boards creaked in the room overhead, and once I could have sworn that a hand passed groping over the panels of my door. I am, I may admit, a believer in ghosts. I even take in a paper that deals with their culture, but I cannot pretend that on that night I looked forward to a manifestation of great uncle Mccarthy with any enthusiasm. The morning broke stormily, and I woke to find Mrs. Cadogan's understudy, a grimy nephew of about 18, standing by my bedside with a black bottle in his hand. "There's no bath in the house, sir," was his reply to my command. "But my aunt said, would you like a tagine?" This alternative proved to be a glass of raw whisky. I declined it. I look back to that first week of housekeeping at Shrille Lane as to a comedy excessively badly staged and striped with lurid melodrama. Towards its close I was positively homesick for Mrs. Rafferty's, and I had not a single clean pair of boots. I am not one of those who hold the convention that in Ireland the rain never ceases, day or night, but I must say that my first November at Shrille Lane was composed of weather of which my friend Flurry Knox remarked: "You wouldn't meet a Christian out of doors, unless it was a snipe or a dispensary doctor." To this lamentable category must be added a resident magistrate. Daily, shrouded in mackintosh, I set forth for the petty sessions courts of my wide district. Daily, in the inevitable atmosphere of wet frieze and perjury, I listened to indictments of old women who plucked geese alive, of publicans whose hospitality to their friends broke forth uncontrollably on Sunday afternoons, of parties who, in the language of the police sergeant, were subtly defined as not to say drunk, but in good fighting trim. I got used to it all in time. I suppose one can get used to anything. I even became callous to the surprises of Mrs. Cadogan's cooking. As the weather hardened and the woodcock came in, and one by one I discovered and nailed up the rat holes, I began to find life endurable, and even to feel some remote sensation of home coming when the grey horse turned in at the gate of Shalane. The one feature of my establishment to which I could not become inured was the pervading sub-presence of some thing or things which, for my own convenience, I summarized as Great Uncle Mccarthy. There were nights on which I was certain that I heard the inebriate shuffle of his foot overhead, the touch of his fumbling hand against the walls. There were dark times before the dawn when sounds went to and fro, the moving of weights, the creaking of doors, a far-away rapping, in which was a workmanlike suggestion of the undertaker, a rumble of wheels on the avenue. Once I was impelled to the somewhat imprudent measure of cross-examining Mrs. Cadogan. Mrs. Cadogan, taking the preliminary precaution of crossing herself, asked me fatefully what day of the week it was. "Friday," she repeated after me. "Friday, the Lord save us! 'Twas a Friday the old master was buried." At this point a saucepan opportunely boiled over, and Mrs. Cadogan fled with it to the scullery and was seen no more. In the process of time I brought Great Uncle Mccarthy down to a fine point. On Friday nights he made coffins and drove hearses. During the rest of the week he rarely did more than patter and shuffle in the attics over my head. One night, about the middle of December, I awoke, suddenly aware that some noise had fallen like a heavy stone into my dreams. As I felt for the matches, it came again, the long grudging groan and the uncompromising bang of the cross door at the head of the kitchen stairs. I told myself that it was a draught that had done it, but it was a perfectly still night. Even as I listened, a sound of wheels on the avenue shook the stillness. The thing was getting past a joke. In a few minutes I was stealthily groping my way down my own staircase, with a box of matches in my hand, enforced by scientific curiosity, but none the less armed with a stick. I stood in the dark at the top of the back stairs and listened. The snores of Mrs. Cadogan and her nephew Peter rose tranquilly from their respective lairs. I descended to the kitchen and lit a candle. There was nothing unusual there, except a great portion of the Cadogan wearing apparel, which was arranged at the fire and was being serenaded by two crickets. Whatever had opened the door, my household was blameless. The kitchen was not attractive, yet I felt indisposed to leave it. None the less, it appeared to be my duty to inspect the yard. I put the candle on the table and went forth into the outer darkness. Not a sound was to be heard. The night was very cold, and so dark that I could scarcely distinguish the roofs of the stables against the sky. The house loomed tall and oppressive above me. I was conscious of how lonely it stood in the dumb and barren country. Spirits were certainly futile creatures, childish in their manifestations, stupidly content with the old machinery of raps and rumbles. I thought how fine a scene might be played on a stage like this, if I were a ghost. How bluely I would glimmer at the windows, how whimperingly chatter in the wind. Something whirled out of the darkness above me and fell with a flop on the ground, just at my feet. I jumped backwards. In point of fact, I made for the kitchen door, and with my hand on the latch stood still and waited. Nothing further happened. The thing that lay there did not stir. I struck a match. The moment of tension turned to bathos as the light flickered on nothing more fateful than a dead crow. Dead it certainly was. I could have told that without looking at it. But why should it, at some considerable period after its death, fall from the clouds at my feet? But did it fall from the clouds? I struck another match and stared up at the impenetrable face of the house. There was no hint of solution in the dark windows, but I was determined to go up and search the rooms that gave upon the yard. How cold it was! I can feel now the frozen, musty air of those attics, with their rat-eaten floors and wall papers furred with damp. I went softly